Today we'll be talking about advanced networking fundamentals. Like I said, fundamentals, just to introduce you to the concept itself. Why is there advanced networking? It's just the fact that everything we've done so far, building a VPC. Like I said, I think I tried as much as well to show you that a VPC is not complex, just depending on how you see it. Like the setup itself is the same. And for the most part, where the complexity comes in is when there is so many VPCs, right? And there's like top level, you need to break that down into different VPCs. Remember, these VPCs will be in multiple accounts. That's where the complexity increases a bit. But the concept is the same, like having a VPC CIDR, breaking that into subnet, putting all the and that's where you see that as time goes on, that's where IAC becomes very powerful because you can't be doing that manually. It's easy for you to do that with one VPC, but if you have to do that for multiple VPCs across different accounts, it becomes more challenging. And that's where IAC does it for us, right? But if you already understand the concept, it means that if IAC creates any kind of VPC for you, you will be able to see it and understand, the entities in the VPC, and you can tell what exactly is what, right? So that's the foundation we're building. But the VPCs we've seen, they're all in the cloud, right? So whether it's in your account, my account, we're creating that connectivity between my account and your account. It's all in the cloud, right? But that's not where networking stops. Sometimes, like I mentioned, some people are already on premise, right? So they'll start on premise. They'll start putting some of the operations they have on the cloud. They'll start creating that hybrid connectivity, right? All in preparation to move to the cloud. And that's one pattern. Some people start ground up from the cloud. So it means that if you work in a company that is completely fully native to AWS, you may not get to interact with direct connections, right? Because they just built, there was never any need for hybrid connection, right? But there's also people who just do they just do hybrid, like they are not planning to fully migrate into the cloud, rather they're in between. So some part of their workload is on premise and some part of it is in the cloud, and then they'll create that hybrid connection to make sure that both is going hand to hand, right? And which is what we are going to be discussing today. Okay. So what we'll learn, we'll talk about hybrid connectivity because that's where the advanced networking comes in. Hybrid connectivity is really what makes it a bit advanced. So we'll look at VPN and direct connect, and we'll talk about side-to-side VPN configuration use case. We'll also talk about the direct connects and the benefits and architectures that are there. Transit gateway for network scaling, how that helps with network scaling. Client VPN for remote access, right? And then high availability and cost optimization. Okay, that's really, like I said, the class is going to be short. It's advanced networking, but I'm bringing in the fundamentals. Many of these things are things that if we really want to go, benefit from it, we have to take one subject at a time, go through it, do a very good hands-on, and then that's how we grow, right? But remember, we are still setting the foundation so that we are all on the same page as time goes on, right? Cool. So when you think about it, I just mentioned here many of the options that you have, right, for hybrid connectivity. Just remember, hybrid is about, we've said cloud. Hybrid is just anything that is other than the cloud and you want to connect it, right? Maybe you have your S3 in the cloud, right? That's all you have in the cloud, but you have an on-premise environment that wants to be using that S3, but they want to use it privately, right? It means, first of all, you need to connect the on-premise environment to the AWS cloud. And then when that private connection has been linked, you can access all your private resources in the cloud, okay? So side-to-side VPN is one of the options we'll be seeing. Direct connect is another option. Client VPN is obviously one of the easiest options that we'll see. Transit gateway, and obviously like combination, where sometimes you need to combine these approaches to get the best result. And then when should you use what, okay? It's one of the conversation we're going to be talking about. So what is side-to-side VPN, which is like the first one we're going to be thinking about. So think about it site to site, right? So one site to another site. If it was pure networking, people have a way they will do it, right? So usually you create all those like you create more or less like that direct VPN connection from one site to the other. But in this case, when we say hybrid, it means one end is on AWS and another end is on your on-premise network, right? So whether it's in a data center or it's your own private infrastructure, the most important thing is one site on the left is the on-premise, one site on the right is AWS. And the idea is that you need to create that connection, right? Maybe like I said, it depends. Maybe you started on-premise, then you started provisioning things, on your AWS account, but now you want to access those things you are creating in your AWS account privately. So the only way to do that is for you to create a connection between those two sites, right? And then that access or connectivity can happen privately, right? So the definition is really secure encrypted tunnel over the internet. So take note, when you do a site-to-site VPN, so you connect two sites, right, from on-premise to AWS, it's over the internet. It's not a private connection. Please take note of that, okay? It will help you understand how site-to-site VPN works as time goes on, right? It's actually over the internet, right? But what you should take note of is just is secure and encrypted. It's a tunnel that is secure and encrypted, right? But it happens over the internet. That's just what you need to know. So it happens over the internet. What it means is that if it's going over the internet, it means that your bandwidth still plays a huge part, right? Your internet service provider. It depends on how fast your internet is. That's how fast you'll be able to access the service that is on the other side. Okay. But obviously, the main advantage is one site is really on-premise network, and you're connecting to an AWS VPC, right? Remember, we said a VPC is a virtual private connection that is cloud, that is in AWS, right? So it means you're connecting from one private place to a different private place, but over the internet in an encrypted and secure manner. That's really what site-to-site VPN is, okay? So IPsec encryption happens within those tunnels. That's one. And obviously, as everything in AWS, there's really room for you to create redundant tunnels, right? Which means if one tunnel fails, another tunnel can still, carry on with the transaction, right? So it means that you can create like two tunnels for that VPN site-to-site VPN connection to happen. Okay. One thing again you need to take out. So remember I mentioned one, it's over the internet, but secure, encrypted, right? And then another thing you also need to take note of is it's a quicker setup when you compare it to direct connect that we're going to see at some point, okay? Because if you think about direct connect, it takes time, but site-to-site VPN you can set it up in some minutes and hours. You can pretty much set up a site-to-site VPN. So there are two things you need to remember. It's one, site-to-site VPN happens over the internet, but in a secure manner, and it is fast to set up, right? So it's quick to set up compared to a direct connection that we're going to see at some point, okay? And I think I said, I didn't know the item is there, but variable based on internet connection. So it means that your internet connection plays a huge role, right? It means that it's not about AWS here. Because it is going over the public internet, it still depends on your own internet connectivity, okay? But in the typical setup, really, on the AWS side, there is a VPC, right? And then on-premise network, there is whatever is there, whether it's your routers and your switch, whatever is there, right? Your compute that needs to talk to the cloud. Maybe you even have a database that is in the cloud that needs to do something with whatever is in the on-premise. We don't really care. The most important thing you should think about is that there is a VPN connection, right? So in AWS, there is a resource, like we've seen, called a VPN, a VPN connection that you can create. And then on the AWS side, you will create like a virtual private gateway, which is attached to a VPC. And then you create a customer gateway to represent the on-premise side, right? And then the VPN connection will use both. And that's pretty much it. I know on the surface, that's what it is, but there is some basic other configuration that you might need to do for you to have it working. But the concept is that on the VPC side, you're creating a virtual private gateway, right? On the customer side, you're creating a customer gateway, and then you create a VPN connection, combine both of them. Once that happens, what is in your VPC can talk to what is on your on-premise over the internet securely and privately, basically, right? But over the internet, okay? It will traverse over the internet, but in an encrypted and secure manner, okay? So when you think about site-to-site VPN, what are the components that are there? I talked about it. Customer gateway is one. It represents the on-premise side, right? So usually just think about customer is really what you should think about. Represent the on-premise side. There is a virtual private gateway that represents your AWS side, right? So it connects to your VPC. And then there's the VPC connection. So that first diagram really shows you everything that needs to do in terms of like infrastructure, what you need to set up. Every other thing is configuration, meaning, you just need to create a VPN, then create that configuration on it, right? So encrypted tunnels between the gateways, right, that we've mentioned. Routables will be the one that will do the magic, right? So it knows if you are going to the AWS side, use this VPN connection. And then if you're also going to the on-premise side, there is a route that you have to specify to tell it exactly how to get there. And that's why I keep emphasizing the need for you to understand routables, right? Because you see them throughout, right? In many of the resources that you can use BGP, and you can also use static routing options. All that we'll see at some point, but for the most part, if we were to do like a demo, we'll obviously use like static routing. But if you were to have like complete on-premise setup that you have, if you were not modeling just using like two VPCs, you obviously use BGP, right? And then there is obviously metrics you can also monitor, right? So you can have like metrics to show the health of your tunnels, right, as time goes on. Okay, honestly, at this level, that is really all there is to site-to-site VPN. Just know that it's a connection. So if you have an on-premise environment, you have your AWS cloud, you're trying to connect both of them, but the connection goes through the internet, but securely, like in a private, like securely encrypted, right? So it's secure, it's encrypted, but it still goes over the internet. So there is a bit of challenge there. One, it is quick to set up. That's one thing you should take note of. But one thing you should also think about is that the fact that it is limited by your internet, right? So for those who have like fast internet, their connection will be good, but those who their internet is slow, it's also not going to be too good. Okay. And that brings up another option, right? What if you wanted to go direct connect, right? So instead of using the site-to-site method, you could use like a direct connect. But the difference is that if you look at these compared to site-to-site VPN, it's going to take time because it's actually a physical connection, right, that you're creating. And remember the other one, you just need to set up the infrastructure, do some configuration, bam, you're good to go because you're using the internet. But in this case, there is like a physical line, a physical connection that will be done for you on your behalf, right? So it's like a dedicated physical connection to the AWS infrastructure, right? Um, and that most times you do it through a partner. So there's like a partner that will connect your entire data center to AWS. So it's like a complete physical connection, right? That happens. But one thing you can guarantee is that it is both physical, it's both private, right? So it doesn't go through the internet. It doesn't go through the internet. It's like a private connection that you have, right? So consistent network performance and bandwidth, because in this case, you are more or less like pledging to a consistent bandwidth, right? When you opt for direct connect, there is a bandwidth you are subscribing to compared to the internet where it is your ISP that decides it, right? Um, so consistent network performance, you can really determine that, right? And then obviously reduce data transfer costs because everything is going via your private connectivity. You see them in 1 gigabits per second or 10 gigabits per second. So there are different options of direct connections that you can have, right? So when you're trying to like establish a direct connection, you will choose how much bandwidth you want in these options, and then you can set it up. Okay, setup time is one thing you should also take note of. So if I was to ask you, oh, you want to create like a private connection between your on-premise environment and the AWS cloud, and you want to do it as fast as you can, obviously site to site is the fastest, right? Because direct connect, you have to set up with like an AWS partner that has that direct connect, more or less like infrastructure. You have to connect with them to have it set up. So it's like a physical connection that has to happen. So it's going to take time. So that's one thing you should know. But in as much as it takes time, it's a private connection. That's one. It's dedicated to you. Two, so bandwidth is consistent. It's also private. So it just depends on which you favor. In some cases, direct connect is the way to go. But in some cases, also you see where you can do hybrid, right? So have direct connect and then use site-to-site VPN as a backup. Okay, but it takes time. So what does it look like? So this diagram, if you see, it's a bit different from the first diagram because from the first diagram, you're connecting one AWS, one site. In this case, one site is on-premise, the other site is AWS, and you're connecting them directly. But in direct connect, you're basically moving from your customer data center and you're going to a direct connect location. So you see there is a physical connection that goes there, right? But once you are there, you're automatically sent, you're already connected to AWS. That's just how it happens, right? So what you see in the middle is basically direct connect locations that your data center has to physically plug to. And then once that happens, you can connect to your AWS. Obviously, we know that outside that, there are some networking elements involved for it to actually happen, right? But really, that's the trick about it. So in the first case, it was VPC direct to on-premise. In the second case, something is in between. There is like a direct connect location that your on-premise needs to connect to, and then from there, um, you're already inside your AWS network privately and consistent network performance and bandwidth. Okay, cool. So usually, sometimes you see you have to understand the difference and when you should use one over the other. Okay. So, but when you think about the benefits, it's just some of the things that I've talked about: predicted bandwidth, like predictable bandwidth and latency, right? Because when you want to establish a direct connection, you have to choose your bandwidth ahead of time, so it's consistent, right? So what is promised is what you get, right? So obviously reduce data transfer cost because everything is happening over the private network. It's not going over the internet. Remember, the other one is still over the internet. It's just encrypted, but this one is going through the private network. Okay. You see, I think I didn't even know. I think there was an item that I wrote in the slide, but this private connection, not over the internet, right? So higher bandwidth options than the VPN. That's exactly what I was saying. Consistent network performance is there. Supports VLAN tagging for multiple connections. Yes, absolutely, because this is where the advanced networking comes in, right? Because if you have so many ranges that you're already using on premise, you have so many ranges that you're using in the cloud. With VLAN tagging, it's easy for you to create those same connections, right? There's just a lot of opportunity benefits that comes with using direct connect. Okay. Then when we now think about it, what brings everything together? That's where I will introduce transit gateway. Okay, because you've seen how I just said site to site, connection. We've also talked about direct connect as a connection option. But again, all the things we've known up to now is VPC pairing. Basically, the fact that you can connect two VPCs, right? One VPC connects to another VPC, you just pair them together, right? But again, we've seen one of the problems VPC pairing has is non-transitive, right? So over time, if you connect to one VPC and that VPC connects to another VPC, and then you want the VPC A to talk to C, you have to create a special connection again, right? Over time, it becomes very painful. Like I said, many of the things we do it just in a single account. But in the real world, you're talking about multiple accounts, multiple VPCs in different regions. So sometimes it becomes really, really hard to manage. And that's where transit gateway comes in, right? So one thing you should know is it's a hub and spoke model or hub and spoke network topology. And the whole idea is that a transit gateway is just in the middle. You can have so many connections around it, right? And with the right route table, again, all those entities can connect to themselves. So think about it that instead of what we did before where you had to do like pairing, in this case, there's something in the middle that brings everyone together. It's like a round table, right? So, and everyone on that round table can eat from the dining table. That's just what it means. So you know how it is when you are eating from a dining table, right? The food is already on the table. So imagine everyone on that is around that dining table can eat, right, from the same place. That's how direct connect works. Transit gateway works, because transit gateway is like the dining table. Then everyone around it is the many kind of connections you can have. So VPC, your on-premise network, you can, all of them can be around the transit gateway. And because transit gateway is already in the middle, everyone can talk to themselves in as much as there is that route table, right, that allows it to happen. Okay, so it's like the definition I have here is like cloud router for connecting VPC and on-premise, right? So we've seen that what we saw just now, where there is like a direct connection, right? But transit gateway makes that easy because what it means is that you can connect so many VPCs to your on-premise environment without having to do so much VPC pairing, right? So one transit gateway can just connect everyone, right? So it simplifies complex network architectures. That's really the beauty that comes with it. If you ever have to think about it when you compare it to site to when you compare it to like pairing connections that has to happen between two VPCs. Okay, it supports a lot of connections, right? So many connections, right? And the good thing about it is that you can even have, why we talked about VPC pairing, you can now have transit gateway pairing. So what it means is that there's a transit gateway that is already connecting so many things, and then you can have another region that has a transit gateway that also is connecting many things, and then you can pair those two transit gateways together. And once you do that, everyone in this region can talk to everyone in this region once, in as much as there's a route that permits it, right? Remember, I told you route is one very key thing we'll see at advanced stages, where it is really what determines what I can see, who I can see. Okay. Um, so cross-region pairing also happens. So transit gateway pairing, it's like there's nothing we can do about it, but it's good because think about it. If one transit gateway already connects everything in US West 1, US West 2, for example, and there is another transit gateway that connects everything in EU Central, you can pair them together to just have everything in US West 2 to talk to EU Central 1. That's really how it works, okay? Centralized routing and monitoring, which is cool, right? Because in the transit gateway, that's really where all the routing logic comes in, right? That determines if something in US West 2 can get to US EU Central. Okay, and also there's monitoring around it. You can monitor everything in AWS is built in a way where with CloudWatch you can basically monitor everything. Okay. So if you think about the diagram, it's not very clear. It's not as sharp as I want it to be. But if you look at it in the middle, there's basically a transit gateway in there, and you will see around it there are multiple things. So it connects to a VPC, it connects to a VPN connection. So a VPN connection can terminate on the transit gateway. A VPC will terminate there. Direct connect would also can terminate to a transit gateway, right? So and that's why we say it's a hub and spoke, right? It's in the middle, like I said, it's just like a dining table. So everything that is around it, in as much as there's a route in transit gateway that allows you to go to the other side, regardless of where it is, it's going to happen, right? Okay, so that's one thing you need to take note of. So central hub connecting multiple networks, VPC attachment for local connectivity, right? So there's that attachment that needs to happen. You can also do VPN attachment. Remember, your transit gateway will be in AWS. Automatically, you can attach your VPCs, right? But again, you have to bring in your on-premise environment to the AWS cloud, right? Using one of the options that we've mentioned. Maybe it's direct connect, maybe site-to-site VPN. But once it gets to AWS, you can attach it to a transit gateway, and all of a sudden, all your VPCs can talk to your on-premise environment. Similarly, your on-premise environment can talk to your VPCs. The most important thing is there is the right configuration to make it happen. Okay. So direct connect gateway integration, cross-region pairing, like I said, which means that's really the magic in terms of pairing the things that are in one region to the things in a different region, right? All controlled by route tables, right? So route table associations and propagation is one thing also that is there because there is need for you to associate like a route table that says you are here. If you want to go out, you have to use this route table, and these are the people you can see, right? All that can happen within a transit gateway. Okay, this is just exposing you to some of the networking architectures that you are going to be seeing at some point, right? Obviously, we're just starting our cloud journey. It might be too early for you to already be diving into very deep advanced networking, but it's good. You need to understand this for the fundamentals also because you see them in your exam. So what is the key takeaway when you think about transit gateway? Transit gateway VPC pairing still has that one-to-one, right? One-to-one is non-transitive, but transit gateway is in the middle, can bring everyone together. So it's the cool kid in the block, if you want to think about it that way. Okay. So once we've talked about, so we've seen three things, right? First of all, we've seen two ways you can bring your on-premise to the cloud. So that you do it over site to site, but it goes through the public internet in a secure in a secure manner, right? And then we've seen also that you can go through the private route and just connect to a direct connect location. From there, move to AWS, right? Privately with a dedicated bandwidth, right? Um, and then we now saw that transit gateway makes it easy. If there is a transit gateway, all those kind of connections can all just come to a roundtable and everyone will be able to speak to themselves. So we've seen three things. If you're still not clear, you can put it in the chat that you're not clear about those three concepts. But now when you now think about AWS client VPN, right? It's very simple. Like AWS tries in terms of how they name things, right? Site to site, you're connecting to site. But client VPN is really you. If you more or less like somebody who is trying to access a service on AWS, you will still do it over the public internet for the most part, right? But in this case, you want to make sure that that connection is secure, right? So it's more or less like, yeah, in this case, it's really a client, a user who is trying to connect to AWS. and it has to use that client VPN. It's not just a user though. Sometimes maybe you have like you can create a basic VPN connection, right? From even like your more or less like your CI/CD that is on GitHub, that is not on AWS, but you want to have that VPN connection from the AWS, from the GitHub action, for example, or like GitHub to it. Remember, GitHub and AWS are different, right? Code pipeline, like I said, is an option you can use in AWS to do your own CI/CD need. But sometimes not everyone uses code pipeline. Sometimes you want to use something like Terraform and do it from GitHub action, for example. In that case, GitHub is a different entity, AWS is a different entity. You could do it over the internet. Some people do that. But sometimes you also want to create a pure tunnel, right? From AWS, from GitHub to AWS, right? And that's where client VPN becomes a thing, okay? So it's managed client-based VPN service. That's just what it means. Individual access to AWS resources, right? So whichever individuals in this case, in most cases, even you as a person, most times in an organization, you would install an AWS VPN client. Okay, remember it's not, there are so many VPNs there. You know what VPNs do? They basically just encrypt your connection to the internet. It's the same way here. You can have a VPN client from AWS that you install, and every time you want to connect to the resource in the cloud, you have to use that VPN, right? And there is also, it obviously keeps log of who is connecting, so you can also do audit around the organization to see the people using the VPN connection and how all that is happening, right? It's obviously open VPN based. Like I said, many of the VPNs that you know out there, many of them they use open VPN, right? So it's the same concept. So just some basic configuration that you have to do for it to happen. You can integrate it with Active Directory, split tunneling capabilities. What it means is that obviously you can have multiple tunnels, right, for redundancy. Per user connection pricing, like I said, a distinct user has to create that connection, right, to the AWS cloud. So site to site is different. You're completely connecting the site to another site. It's just the way you do VPC pairing. You're connecting an entire VPC to a different VPC, right? But AWS client VPN is really a client, which in this case can be a user. In my own case, I'm trying to access AWS, but I can only do that via the AWS VPN, right? So it's a way for you to securely allow like your staffs, to access your application instead of just going via the internet. More or less like, I mean, if you're going through the internet, there's nothing but using it like a private connection can also keep you more secure, more compliant, and all that. So there is still also that option. So when you think about what are the use cases, like remote employees, remember remote is a thing, right? So remote is a thing. People work remotely. It means if you are in the office, you use the office network. Obviously, there will be some network policies and all that around the office. But if you work remotely, you have to connect to the internet to access AWS service, right? So it's a good way for you to have like a VPN that people can use to access corporate resource from the client. So it means that if you are not on the VPN, there are many resources that you will not be able to see, right? And it's there, like in real world. So for example, you can have your database. I think we've seen OpenSearch, for example, like OpenSearch, your databases, your all the kind of clusters we've talked about in the past. Ideally, you create those clusters, but they'll be private. And the only way you can access them is via like a private connection, right? But again, if your staffs are all connected from around the world and they are on the internet, the fastest way, the easiest and secure way for that to happen is they'll have to install an AWS client VPN on their end. And then only from that VPN can they be able to use those private resources. That's how it works, okay? Those resources are not on the internet. You can't access them on the internet. But again, VPN is a way that once you are connected, it drops you in and allows you to. You can also have security groups that says this resource you can only access it if you are from the VPN connection. Okay. Think about developer access also to private AWS environments is also one use case. Temporary contractor access. So if you have like a contractor that you're working with, you just want to give them quick access. You don't want them to be accessing your database over the internet or doing all that, right? Maybe private connectivity is better. Secure access from mobile workforce is almost the same because people who are remote. Compliance requirement for data access, right? Because yeah, like I said, over the internet is also more. There's a lot that goes on there, but um, compliance could be one of the major reasons. Like I said, people get away with it, but if you are in a sector that is highly regulated, you have to go with compliance, right? Also, alternative to traditional VPN appliances. So they are different, right? If you were to use a VPN, normal VPN that you just buy from the internet, it obviously will give you a new IP address, encrypt your, do a lot of things for you. But it's different in this case because there's no way you can manage that and connect it to the AWS system easily. But with client VPN, it's easier basically. Okay. So don't forget the difference. So let's look at the difference between the three things we've mentioned. We said site-to-site VPN, really connecting two sites, right? Direct connect is another way of connecting two sites, but it will take time. So site-to-site VPN is faster. It's obviously going to take hours for you to get a site-to-site VPN up. Direct connect is going to take weeks and months, right? Because you need to get a direct connect location, like a partner, connect to them. There's like a physical infrastructure setup that needs to happen, right? Client VPN obviously is also ours, right? But the use cases are different. You can't connect an entire on-premise environment using a client VPN. You see the word client, meaning it's a particular client, okay, not an entire network or on-premise infrastructure, okay? If you look at it, one, like I said, site is still limited by your internet, but direct connect, there's really a lot of bandwidth in there. But client VPN is really per user basis, right? You're also affected by the internet that you have. It's just that you're going using the client VPN, okay? Cost is obviously low on the site-to-site VPN. Is high for direct connect because yes, direct connect is not cheap, okay? And then client VPN is basically per VPN connect, client VPN connection, okay? When you think about the encryption, IPsec is the encryption on the site-to-site VPN route. Direct connect is optional, but you still can set up one. Then client VPN is really open VPN, which is a standard that is out there. So what is the use case? Use case for site-to-site connection is really hybrid. That's why we're even talking about it in the first place. Direct connect is also hybrid, but you now want higher bandwidth, right? So if you wanted higher bandwidth, still hybrid connection, you use direct connect, right? And then client VPN is really for remote access. You just want people to use the AWS VPN to access your AWS resources from a remote location, okay? So availability, once you need to take out, I think I've mentioned this like several times because I don't want you to forget. Direct connect is a dedicated connection. Site-to-site VPN is internet dependent. Client VPN is internet dependent, right? Because yeah, site-to-site, you're going over the internet in an encrypted manner and secure manner, secure and encrypted. Direct connect, dedicated private connection. And then client VPN, you're also going over the internet, so it's also dependent on the internet. Okay. Um, so when you think about what are the best practices around talking about hybrid networks, end-to-end encryption, obviously for sensitive data, right? So encryption is a big deal. If you are dealing with sensitive data, encryption has to be like a huge deal for you, right? All of them, they have their own options of how you can have it happen, right? Network segmentation with route tables, we are going to be seeing that, right? Because when you think about it, I think when I was telling you about VPCs and I've showed you in a demo, a subnet is usually given a route table. A route table just says if you are leaving this subnet, this table tells you where you can go and how you can get there. Okay, and it's the same way. So regardless of all these options that we've mentioned, there's usually like you can break them into segments. So you can break them into network segments and use route tables to control who can go where. Okay, so regardless of how I told you you can do all this site-to-site connection and all that, you still can control who can see what. It's that granular. Okay, you can decide. Yes, there is this entire on-premise is connected to the VPC, this entire AWS infrastructure, but you still can decide who can get to where, right? And that's where network segmentation comes in. You have to segment, right? Break networks down. That's why you have subnets, right? That's why you have VPCs. That's why you have all those CIDRs that we're talking about, because those CIDRs that you see, they become a segment, and you can actually block an entire segment and say if you are from this segment, you will not be able to talk to this segment, right? So that's why, as simple as it is, we have to start taking it serious because it's the foundation. Okay. So route tables, network segmentation is really how you break them down into like those CIDRs, how you break them down. On-premise could be one CIDR, the AWS side could be one CIDR, but you can also use route tables to control who can go where and what they can do. Okay. And then security group, we've seen that, we've played with it, we know what it is, right? So, and network ACL also, if you wanted to do security around subnet level. Okay. VPC tunneling, monitoring, and alerting. Obviously, if you have like a VPC tunnel that you've created, you need to, everything in AWS at the end is one of the bulk of the work you'll be doing. It has to be monitored. You have to be able to be alerted if one tunnel is down or all the tunnels are down, because what it means is that your connections are broken. So monitoring, alerting is really the core of what happens in the cloud. Those things are in the cloud. For the most part, they will work, but there are sometimes they will go down, and you don't. You want to be notified. You want to know, and that's where the monitoring will come in. You set up the monitoring. Then on top of the monitoring, there is alerts, right? That tells you, oh, this connection that you have here is broken, and then you have to go in there and find out why it's broken, fix it if you can, or send the support to AWS, right? So all that is obviously you can have like certificate management. So you can have, we've not seen ACM yet, right? But it's also a service in AWS where you can do your own certificate management and use it for all these connections that we've seen, right? Regular security assessment is something you will obviously see. It happens in most AWS setup. Some people have dedicated security team that does it, but sometimes it's still part of what you need to know, right? Regularly looking at many of the key areas that you need to be looking at to make sure that there's no breach that is happening unnoticed. Okay, it's some of the things that you need to pay attention to. Monitoring network performance, obviously, like I said, CloudWatch metrics will do a lot of that for you. The Direct Connect also has its own dashboard. As time you will see that. VPC flow logs, we've talked about it, right? Either way, the thing is that many of these networks, although we said we can connect on-premise to the cloud, but whenever all those connections happen, in as much as they touch your VPC, there is an entry in VPC log that will tell you that, right? So VPC log is very important because regardless of where you're connecting from, it's not invisible. It still will see you, keep a log for you. So ability to know, monitor those things, analyze them can help you keep an eye on your network, right? Obviously, network latency and packet loss tracking. Yeah, you can also see how fast are people saying things or how slow, right? And know the factors that are doing that. Automated alerting for connection issues. I think I've said that already. And then troubleshooting. Basically, you have to come up with a methodology to troubleshoot. Sometimes there are things that it's not there. You've gone through the process before, then you are building a process around it. That's one. And now, even with the days with AI, many of the efforts we are making now is that you will do it as a human first, and then think of how you can make AI do it on your behalf, right? Because the thing is that the way the world is going now, the things you can do, you have done it over and over again. You shouldn't always do it. So if you've done something once, twice, three times, you shouldn't be doing it every time with the way the world is going. So the thing is that, and that's where I said troubleshooting methodology, because if you've already know the steps to troubleshoot, the next thing you can do is that you can put that into a process or build a tool around it and have an AI system do that troubleshooting for you, right? And then that relieves you of that initial pressure, and then you can focus on bigger things, because that's really where we're going to, where people are now focused on more important things, and then many of the things that are repetitive, mundane, you can throw them to AI to do. Okay, this is just addition to some of the things you need to know. Like I said, it's going to be a short module. The whole idea is just to introduce you to many of the advanced AWS networking options that we'll see. But all the ones that I've mentioned, they are really right, because for the most part, you want to connect two environments, whether it's AWS or your on-premise, right? And then what is the tool that makes it easy, which is where Transit Gateway comes in. Okay. And so many of that are just basically what you need, right? For the most part, you just need two sites connecting to each other, and AWS has all the resources, and at some point we'll get there. So please take note of all the things that I've mentioned. It just helps you to understand why one option is better than the other, right? Especially in the time of I think the only thing I thought I saw I was supposed to have in the slide that I didn't mention is the fact that you remember Direct Connect is dedicated, right? So a lot of companies, what they do is that they'll create dedicated Direct Connect, and as a backup, they'll use site-to-site VPN just in case if one goes down, you still can rely on the other. Okay, and that's what the question was about at the beginning when I was asking you what's like a thorough, resilient solution that you can have, right? So you can have a DX connection, and then as a backup, you can have a site to site. Remember, site to site, they will still go via the internet, but in a protected, in a very secure manner. Because as with everything, anything can go down, right? The direct connect location, something can happen. That's the whole idea. It goes because some people remember direct connect location is one location, right? Some people that's the only location they are using. But some people will be even more redundant. They will use multiple, like two direct connect locations. This is advanced, more advanced basically, but they can use two direct connect locations. But for the most part, most people use one. So why they will need a site-to-site VPN as a backup is in case that direct connect location goes down, people still can access, their network will still function using the site-to-site VPN connection option. Okay, so VPN provides quick encrypted hybrid connectivity. We've seen that obviously Direct Connect offers dedicated high performance connections. Transit Gateway simplifies it. It's just like I said. Anytime you think about it, just think about a dining table, like a dining table. So Transit Gateway here is the dining table, and every other thing that needs to be connected can just be around it, and they all can see themselves in as much as they have a route that allows it, right? So client VPN enables secure remote access, user access. Choose connectivity based on your requirements and budget, right? So choose based on what you want. So if you, for example, I think one thing that is easy for both of us as it stands is client VPN. You should be able to set it up yourself. So what it means is that you are using your AWS resources, right? But you're using it over the internet. One thing you can do to that is to set up a client VPN for yourself, such that you can only access your AWS environment when you are on that client VPN. Else, you won't be able to access some of your private resources. That's one exercise that is easy. For the other ones, like site to site, it's also easy to practice when the time comes. But direct connect is a bit tricky because direct connect requires a physical connection, right? Which sometimes is hard to reproduce. Okay, and then plan for redundancy. Obviously, is why you're having to choose multiple locations or create multiple tunnels, right? And then you are monitoring the performance. Okay, I think that's it. But before we go into the quiz for today, I'm just going to go through the console, like just so that you know many of the things that I've mentioned, they are not just theory. Those resources are actually in the cloud. Okay, so we still have time. I'll just go through the console just to show you some of the elements of the things that I've already mentioned, right? And then just for you to understand to some extent, like that these things are not just they are actually resources that exist in the AWS cloud. So this is my account. So I think I talked about a site-to-site VPN. That's really where we started from, right? So um, so if you check your VPN connection, for example, if you do client, so if you see here, for example, there's like client VPN endpoint, right? Which is really exactly like the client VPN that we talked about. It's different from like having a site-to-site VPN connection. Site-to-site is really one site connecting to the other site using public internet, but encrypted, right? Okay, so if I was to open this site-to-site VPN connection, obviously it takes if we were to set this up, it's going to take time. But let's even try to create one and let's see what are the options, right? So if I was to create a VPN connection, for example, the things you need to take note of is that let's forget about the name, right? But just know that there is the target gateway type, right? So what it means is that um, where are we targeting? In this case, most times it's obviously there is like your VPC, right? And I think I showed a diagram that says you need a VPC on one side, right? Or like the AWS side. That's really what I'm saying. So there's the AWS side, and then there is the on-premise side, right? So here, obviously, it just depends on how you're creating the connection on the AWS side. You could use a virtual private gateway that lands on the VPC, or you could use a transit gateway, right? And then you can associate it here. So what that looks like is that if I actually open here, there is room for us to actually create. So let me search for this. So the virtual private gateway. So if you see a virtual private gateway, for example, let's see what it takes to create one. So if I was to create a virtual private gateway, remember I said the virtual private gateway itself is on one side. So if I was to create one, I probably will give it a name and then I'll attach it to a VPC, right? So I've created one side. Then on the VPN side, I probably would say one side of it is the virtual private gateway, but the next part is really the customer gateway that you need to create. There's also resources here for you to create the customer gateway. And then that customer gateway is where you can now choose the static routing that points you to the on-premise environment, right? But and then like there's usually like two tunneling options. Remember, it's a site-to-site VPN over the internet, securely happening in an encrypted and secure manner. Okay. Yeah, so it's not hard, but like I said, we're still building the foundation for many of these subjects. Okay. Um, so we talked about side-to-side VPN, and then we talked about transit gateway. So, like I said, these resources are not they are not they are resources that are in the account. So, for example, if I was to go to a transit gateway, I'm just going to show you some of the elements of the transit gateway that I've been talking about. So, if I was to create, I do not even have a transit gateway. But I mean, there's just a lot that goes in. But one of the major things you see there is that there's really the concept of route tables, right? So in there, you can have segments fall into a route table, and that decides where they can go to. But let's see if there's really an introduction to transit gateway that they have here. I was thinking there is like a there is really none. I was thinking there's like this welcome page that I can see that tells us like what transit gateway is all about. But it's really a network transit hub that interconnects VPCs, right? Because the whole idea is on one side there is a VPC, on the other side, it's like another on-premise connection completely, right? Within the same AWS account or across accounts, it doesn't really matter in this case. Um, yeah. So, but if I had to, if okay, yeah, I think I was looking for something under the transit gateway exactly. So this is what I was looking at. So one of the things you need to take note of is that when transit gateway comes in, there's always going to be the concept of a route, right? So transit gateway route table. And so if I was to create, okay, it will need me to attach it to a transit gateway. But the whole idea is that there's really going to be a route, and that route is really what's going to tell you where you can get to. So don't think, although we said that you can connect your entire on-premise environment to the AWS cloud, right? You can, but it's still, when you get into the cloud, you still can be limited on where you can go. Okay. And what else did we talk about? So if you check here, it's just basically introduction, right? It's introduction. So I think I was also looking at the customer gateway. So the customer gateway is obviously on the customer side. If you wanted to connect the customer side, right? So if I was to create a customer gateway in this case, I will do customer gateway, and then this is one of the most important parts where I'm going to choose the gateway that connects me directly to the customer, right? Certificates, if you wanted to create that encryption around it, and that's it. That alone is going to take you, that if you have that and the virtual private gateway on one side, you can create a VPN connection that connects the two, right? So these are advanced subjects, but it's good you know them. Like, you just know at least that, okay, it means that I'm currently doing everything in AWS, but if I have an environment that is non-AWS, I can connect both, and depending on my connectivity option, I can choose how I want to see the services, right? So direct connect, obviously, let's even see what it takes to create a direct connect so that direct connect is not cheap. Just so you know, if I was to do direct connect, for example, because we said direct connect is like the physical dedicated connection, right? So a dedicated network connection to AWS, right? So it's not like the site-to-site VPN. So when you look at it, you are creating a connection. That's number one. You collect your letter of authorization. You don't need all that, but there are some exams that you need to write. You need to understand all these steps, right? So create connection, get your letter of authorization. You provide it to an APN partner, and then they will create that connection for you. But if I was to establish a connection today, it depends. It tells you the different types of connection you can create. I think I was mentioning it subtly, but because it's a beginner class, it may not mean a lot. You may not get it clearly. But again, it gives you so many options. So this is one direct connect location. This is also another direct connect location, and it's saying that if you have like your own customer data center, you could create redundant, right? You could create redundant such that if this entire location goes down, you can depend on another location. But that's one. What about another option? Another option is, okay, so the first one, you create two direct connect location, but you create redundant connections between them. So inside of it, you create two connections within the same location, right? So you have two, right? Just to make sure that if one completely goes down, you still have one. But even within that one, you have two connections in there, right? Such that if one of the connections goes away, this is like four ways of being redundant, right? But again, you can do high resilience, just meaning that you're creating these. Some of these things are things that, depending on the exam you're writing, it will test you about these things. But in some cases, you are creating really two different locations, just creating one tunnel there, right? So creating one connection, creating one connection, and then really development and test, you really don't care. You're just creating one in. You're just interested in one location and then creating two tunnels there. But here also is where you cannot have like a backup, which is your site-to-site VPN, so that if this goes down, you can rely back on your site-to-site VPN connection. Okay. And then if you, I think that's really it. But if you were to go, for example, for the like if you wanted to, so this classic, the other one is like a wizard that you can use. But let's see for classic, for example, my DC DX connection, right? So just let's see what it's going to look like. Location, this is where you have to choose because a physical location is involved, right? You have to connect to a physical location, and that location is what is going to drop you into the AWS infrastructure. So you have to choose one. So in this case, I'm just going to do US. I don't know, like there's so many places in US that I can choose. Let me just choose Denver. And then here is where you now choose the bandwidth. You can see it in options of 1 Gbps, 10 Gbps, 100 Gbps. I mean, it just depends on, how massive you want that physical connection to be in terms of bandwidth, right? And then once you have that, you can choose your provider, and create the connection. It's going to take time. That's where I told you it's weeks and months because that connection has to happen physically before you can do anything, okay? And then once that is done, you pretty much now would. So direct connect doesn't do all the connection, right? It creates a connection that you will now have to use all the other things that we've talked about. In this case, like a transit gateway to bring in that direct connection to your AWS infrastructure. Okay, but it's all advanced. You just need to basically understand some of these little elements, and then as time goes on, you continue to grow. Okay. Um, with that said, I think, yeah, it's this, like I said, it's fundamentals of the advanced part of AWS networking that we're just discussing here and trying to make you see why you need some what you need to know about them. Okay. And that brings us to the end of the class. Like you're aware, we're done with VPC, so we're basically going into something more, something else, some other interesting area of the class. And but please don't miss Sunday. Sunday is really where we're going to really sit down, unravel, like we usually do in a chill manner. Play around VPCs, get comfortable with it, do anything around it, and try different options that are out there, okay, for us. Like I said, many of these classes I try to make it less than an hour so that the recording is easy for me to give it back to you so I can consume it. So I try to keep the class less than an hour. But Sundays is really where we take our time. We're just there. We're just doing practicals. We're just building. So there I can give more time. Okay.